Hi, can
Hello.
you guys hear us? I guess we should wait for them to join us.
Yes, we just recorded 4 minutes of static, so
hopefully this is not 4 minutes of static, and hopefully you can join us and hear us. So I'm going to go share things in the places, and we can get verification of that. If you can hear us, welcome to the Thought Leaders Leadership Forum live stream.
Do we need to talk because
yes,
you're typing?
I can't talk.
Yes, so this is our third live stream. Please let us know if you can hear us. I think that's you watching. Let us, actually, you can test that. Test it. Yay, it's working, I think.
It's working.
Okay, so this is our third leadership live stream of the month of April. Next week, we're going to be switching things up a little bit with a roundtable discussion. More on that in a second, but we're glad that you're here. And today we're going to be talking all about the feels. So turns out that leaders are not robots and they have them just like any other normal human. But I think a lot of times we shove them down. So, and don't quite know how to leverage them or work through them or let them be, right? It's working. You're now deaf. Oh, good. I'm guessing you turned it up really loud, and now you have Marie screaming in your ears.
Sorry.
Sorry, guys. Hi.
Thank you for being our tester. Okay, let me make sure I have the right one that I'm sharing places because I don't want to share the wrong one.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're doing well now with the sound. So this same time next week, turned it up to 11. Okay, let me tell a quick story. So last year we hosted a retreat in New Mexico, and we went to a cute little shop in Santa Fe with one of our clients and friends, Rochelle Sanchez here in this group. And we were in this shop that like had something about birds. They were just very into birds. Everything was birds. And I found these postcards and I had to have them. And it was like beautiful paintings of birds that were captioned. And one of them was this bird that was kind of looked a little wide-eyed, a little maybe not all in its full right bird brain. And it said, I like to turn the awesome up to 11 and then break off the knob. So that's us with our sound. Anyway.
Hi.
Hi. So anyway, next week, the same time, instead of being the Jesse Marie show, we're going to be opening up the floor to everybody for a roundtable. This will be our third leadership roundtable discussion. So this is an opportunity for you guys to come and participate in the conversation and to get to know each other, to share as peers.
And not just listen to us blab, because as much as we love blabbing at you, we really want you to feel like you're a part of the conversation too. And we fully admit that we are not the experts on every single thing that we talk about in this group. And in fact, this week's topic is a great example of that, which we'll get into in a minute.
True story. The other thing that we're really excited about is that we are here in person, really poking each other. Like,
you can touch me.
Yay. Not that kind of partner. But yes, we're here hosting a client retreat. We are in Chattanooga, Tennessee, not too far from you, James. And we are going to be inviting our lovely clients to come join us tomorrow. So we'll probably have an email coming out to you guys or some reflections coming out to you guys soon about takeaways from the retreat. It's doing the thing that happens when you're in the South and there's humidity again, is what it's doing.
Wow.
You've gotten too used to California
yeah.
with it. So yes, if we have takeaways from the retreat, we'll definitely be sharing them with you guys. Yeah, because there's always amazing things to be learned when you're hanging out with people and really focusing on your business and giving it some dedicated time, putting away all the distractions and the notifications and really being able to dig in, implement, and talk about sort of big picture stuff.
So this week, what we're talking about is feelings, which, as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, is not necessarily our zone of genius area of expertise, but that said, it's still something that's really important to talk about. And even though it's a sometimes uncomfortable topic to talk about, especially if you're in a leadership role, well, we're sort of leading by example here by being like, well, we don't like talking about feelings, but we're going to do a whole week on feelings.
And I think it's a mark, too, of how far we've come, because I remember very clearly one of our last calls with Lacey Seitz. Not like last calls ever. That sounds like it's over. But like one of the last sessions we had during our last coaching engagement with her, where basically she was like, no, Marie, you do have feelings. You're not a robot. And I was like, you're right. I have feelings.
Whereas I was still in denial, and my response was, you're wrong. I don't have feelings.
So that's where we're coming from. That was us like a year and a half ago. We've also had the great privilege and joy of working with Lisa Carpenter over the last 16 months now.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
It's a thing. It's
crazy.
Yeah. We like legit know each other now. Lisa, if you're watching this is like a tribute to you, because we've learned so much from you and learned about ourselves through you. And I think what we've learned is something that I think is very relevant to a lot of leaders who are sometimes shoving down their feelings, like stomping them into the ground. Or I think you also see a lot of times sort of intuition-led leaders who it becomes all sort of feeling focused, and then there's sort of no processing on the other side.
So if you checked out the email that was sent just before we went live, we picked out 4 specific areas to talk about, and we'll sort of talk organically around that, seeing how the conversation goes, but 4 things that we thought were sort of important points around the idea of leadership and thought leadership and feelings, and how we deal with and express and incorporate our feelings are how many leaders resist feelings, which is sort of what we were just talking about. Which is not a good idea, despite what the initial inclination might be. Why emotion converts better than logic every single time. How to balance your feelings with logic so you don't overdo either side of it. And then what to do when you're feeling all of the feels. So
full spectrum.
Yeah, all.
And we'd love to hear from you guys too. And this was a question that we posted, and some of you guys have been responding to this in the thread, in the comment thread in the group. But sort of where do you typically fall on the spectrum? Do you feel the feels first? Do you go to like the thinking part of your brain first? What is your instinct? And do you notice that the other side sort of gets left in the dust unless you're kind of intentional about it?
Yeah, and what feels uncomfortable about the other side too? So the first bullet there is how many leaders resist feelings, and I think part of that resistance is that there is this resistance to it because, and fill in the blank with a lot of different things, but I know in my case and in my personal experience, the resistance was that for a long time I told myself the story that if I allowed myself to sit with my feelings or talk to people about my feelings or express them, especially in a business context, it would be seen as a sign of weakness.
And like unprofessionalism, right?
Yeah.
I think that comes up a lot too for people, especially when they come from a corporate background or like sort of a more structured background, like education or like, you know, nonprofits where you, it's about the good of the company, or it's about the good of the organization. And ultimately what is good for the company or the organization is the health of the people within it. But I think a lot of times it gets interpreted as like its needs need to come before our needs as the worker bees, or even as the leaders within it, right? So I think if that's the background you've come from, and
it might be true of some corporate settings. You know, there may be certain work situations where having an open conversation about your feelings is not really appreciated at that level or with that particular environment. And I think there's this tendency, it's just like the voice work we do with clients. When we have clients who are coming from corporate and they're trying to create content that sounds like them and not like a stodgy corporate like robot, they've been trained to sound a certain way. They've been trained to, in this case, deal with their feelings in a certain way. And there's a sort of untraining that has to happen in order for us to feel comfortable and find where the line is in our own business. Mm-hmm. And I think it's easy to just replicate what you've already done instead of finding your own line, which is going to be different for everyone. Sorry, I just hit you.
It's okay, because we're in person. We can accidentally hit each other.
I'm not used to people being close to my arm flailing. I'm a hand talker.
Yes, exactly. So, okay, so I like this revelation too, not revelation, but like
insight.
Insight, thank you, from James. He says, I am an all the feels Hulk smash kind of guy. He says, I actually don't resist feelings much. I've always been comfortable feeling things and sharing them with people, but I've definitely felt less professional for being so in touch with my feelings, especially when I was working a day job, and also felt like my feelings are more likely to control me than I am to control them. So this is the whole thing about the spectrum, right? Like we all sort of fall in different places on that spectrum. We're all complex people, and we deal with things that arise in our lives or things that are going on for us in very different ways. And that's okay, right? Like that's part of what makes us a beautiful people, right? Like, but I do think too that the feeling question can sort of end up being problematic for people regardless of where they fall in the line. So for you, James, it's been about like, okay, when I'm me, I feel like maybe it's somehow like those emotions and like me being able to freely express them and understand them, because that's not always easy for people to do. Maybe coming across as unprofessional. I'm a little concerned about that, right? Or me, I'm like totally opposite side of the spectrum. I don't, and I think you probably resonate with this too. Sometimes I don't even know what I'm feeling. I don't have a name for it until maybe like even 24 hours later, which probably drives poor Josh, my husband, crazy. But like I have to have time to process what I was even feeling. And then once I do, then I have to figure out like, what do I do? It's all very like, I have to figure out. Yes. That's like where it's coming from. And what happens then on like the professional side, it's not that I sound less professional, it's that I sound like a robot.
Hey Stephanie, thanks for joining us. Yeah, and I think you touched on something really important there. It's the process and processing. Yeah. Some people, when they feel feelings, they can immediately name the feeling and say, I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling like I want to throw up. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling ecstatic. Whereas other people are like, I'm feeling a feeling. It's generally in this area of the feeling spectrum. But I don't have a name for it yet.
Or a reason.
Right. And I think it takes practice. And this was actually one of the first activities that Lisa Carpenter assigned me, was this feelings wheel, which just showed all sorts of different emotions and sort of the high level of like sad, and then a breakdown of different types of sad, and then a breakdown even further from there, so that you could practice getting really consistent and not just reacting or thinking, but in naming your feelings, so that then you could sort of say, okay, this is what is happening, and now I can create a plan to move forward.
Mm-hmm. James says, it is okay. I don't hate myself for this. I'm actually really proud to be a man who's willing to cry. Most men these days won't let themselves. It's just one example. But at the same time, I totally want to know that I can function even when I'm dealing with feelings. And sometimes that's difficult. Totally, right? Yeah. Also, the emotion versus logic thing is huge, since I'm an emotion person and my fiance is a logic person.
Yeah. Yeah. Stephanie says she's been journaling around her feelings while doing morning mindset work. That's awesome. And that's something I've been meaning to do more of. I always sort of choke up when I start journaling about feelings. I'm like, okay, I gotta do this. And there's something that wants to come out, but it's just like stuck. I love that, James. And I totally can identify that with that, because my girlfriend and I are sort of the same in that she is very much an emotions person and I'm very much a logic person. And we've had conversations, I don't think she'd mind me sharing this, but we've had, if she does, who cares? I'll beg forgiveness. If she does.
You're like, I will logic my way out of it.
She will feel feelings and I will logic my way out of it. No, she wouldn't, because she talks about this pretty openly.
Yeah.
So she's the sort of person who cries very easily, and like as soon as she feels a feeling, it is on her face and in her words. And she's had that struggle that you mentioned, James, where in a professional situation where she feels like she is hurt, she'll have that reaction and then feel like she has to apologize for it because it seems unprofessional.
Right.
When she's actually just expressing what her feelings and the way that comes most naturally to her. And it's really hard for her to stop doing that, just like it's really hard for me to stop and say, okay, I need to show what I'm feeling instead of just sort of robotically talking through it, because there's a disconnect there too. So it's like two very different ends of the spectrum, but we're all trying to reach an equilibrium.
Right. So we sort of have this spectrum. Nobody's like on one end or falling off of it necessarily, but you know, I think step one is sort of identifying like where's your natural perch, right? Like where do you sort of gravitate to so that you can figure out and remind yourself. I think we all kind of know this about ourselves a lot of times. I say that, but I didn't, right? So like take some time to work it out and like figure out where is your natural perch on the spectrum, the branch. Like I'm making a weird analogy here. And the other piece of it is like figure out like when you're sort of on one side more than the other, where are some missed opportunities or where are some places where you may not be thinking about something naturally or you may not be doing something naturally, that the people in your life, whether it's your fiance, right, or it's your clients or it's whoever, they may be wired a little differently. And so just being cognizant of that throughout the process.
And also, I think taking the time to recognize what the benefits are of the other side that is not your natural tendency.
And the benefits of your side too,
yeah.
right? Because there's strengths to all of it.
Right. But I think, like, for me personally, I resisted that for a long time. I was like, I am a logic person. I don't feel feelings and I don't want to talk about it. Like, it wasn't until I recognized that there are actual benefits to talking about your feelings and being open about them and recognizing them and, you know, working through them and just being like, get down there, just go away. There are benefits to that I just did not want to admit existed. And once I admitted that they existed, I was able to be a more dynamic person to not just myself and my personal relationships, but also to you guys, to my audience, to the way I approached business. And it helped me make decisions in the business better because I could do things from both a place of logic and what makes sense, and a place from what intuitively feels like the right action to take right now.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like this conversation is going to end up being a little one-sided because we're similar in our sort of natural approach to life. And so we would like to hear from you guys to continue. Thank you so much for those of you who are commenting on this. And if you have anything to say after the fact on the replay.
We want to hear from the feelers.
Yes, because I'm listening to myself as I'm talking and I'm like, well, it's about processing and it's about thinking about where you are on the line and it's about like it's all these words that are like very much like
on the logic side.
Yes.
Which is interesting though, right? Because whenever we talk about our strengths as writing, you're the feeler and I'm the thinker.
I am the feeler of the two of us. I'm closer to the center of the branch. But it's definitely something I'm still working through. It's something that I didn't even recognize was a part of me until a year and a half ago. I really did think that like I'm very able to tap into other people's emotions and sort of sense what they're feeling and be a good listener and sort of just approach those conversations very respectfully. But I didn't think that I had my own feelings. And so Lacey was like, when you have very strong empathy, that's because you also have very strong feelings. And I was like, get out of here.
That's really interesting though, because I do think that your empathy is a huge strength and I mean, it's a strength as a writer in general, but especially with given your background in the types of writing that you've done. And we've been talking so far about feelings as far as like us feeling feelings, but as a leader, the skill of empathy is huge. I mean, you can't really be an effective leader unless you have a good sense of what your community is feeling and thinking. And there are two ways of doing that. Either you naturally sort of sense it, or you ask them and take what they say at face value, or a combination of the two. And so I think having that empathy skill is huge.
Yeah, yeah. And I think too, like one of the first lessons from the next book club book, Ask, is like when you ask somebody something at face value, like it's not trustworthy.
Yeah, I don't always know the answer.
So this is true for like audience research, but it's also true for like how your people are feeling, because like, oh, they don't want to hurt your feelings, or they're still working through it themselves, or like they just don't really feel like sharing it, or whatever the reason is, right? Poor Josh. So many times he's like, are you okay? I'm like, yes. And he's like, okay.
That's like the worst. I mean, I do it too, but it's still the worst. I recognize that it is legitimately the worst.
Yeah, I know. I am the worst. So like he can't take that at face value when I do that. So
yeah.
So I think that's a challenge, right, for those of us who are on the thinking side or who resist allowing the feels to come out, is just to sort of say like I'm not sure. Let me get back to you. I'm working through it. Things don't feel quite right, but I don't have an answer for you yet. Like at least that's something.
I don't have the words. The words are coming. Please hold.
And if you're on the feeling side, right, like acknowledging too that like the thinkers in your life maybe in the midst of that process, it's like for you diving into a pool. For us, it's like diving into Jello, and you're like, right? Like
it sounds really messy.
You'll get through it. You'll get through it, but it's gonna take some time.
You might drown more quickly.
It's delicious.
You are on top of it with analogies today.
Oh, you guys, thanks for putting up with me. Yes. Okay. Okay. I'm glad that you're balancing us out with feels. It is a spectrum. Empathy with my clients is a huge strength of mine. I'm not surprised by that at all, James. They're trusting me with part of their business and their story, right? And a part of their soul. Exactly. Without empathy, I'd just be someone giving their paper a C-.
Oh. That's so true, though. And I think a lot of the people who are represented in this group fall into a category where empathy is a really important piece of the puzzle, because whether you're helping someone write, or you're writing for someone, or you're providing a coaching or a consulting service where you have to really understand not just what they do, but why they do it, what their story is behind it, the systems and strategies that they put in place, which feels logic, but it probably comes from a place of emotion. Yeah. Like those systems exist for a reason. Right. So it's like they're inseparable from one another.
Yes. So there's sort of two things going on here. One is like assessing where we all are. Again, a logic word. But take some time to think about it, really, even if you're a feels person.
And take some time to feel into it, even if you're a thinking person.
Yes. Thank you for the flip
side. I'm thinking through the feeling words to include.
Guys, we're hopeless. We try. We really try.
We should not do these live streams when we're in the same place. We are a mess.
Anyway, there's the individual side of it, right, where we look at ourselves, and then there's also the part where we are interacting with other humans who are also on their own places on the spectrum. Those other humans oftentimes are our clients, or they're the people for whom we're an influence. And so just sort of being sensitive to that, having empathy towards them, right, for where they are. This is, again, I think why last week's discussion around audience research and the book that we're going to be reading next month is super relevant, because it's a way to kind of systematize empathy into your business. It's also the people on your team, right? So if you have a VA, you have an OBM, you have contractors, you have whatever, being able to track where they are in that spectrum is also helpful. So one of the things that we've done in our business is when we onboard new high-level clients, we ask them to take 2 quizzes. One is actually a love languages quiz, because we want to know how they express and receive love, so that, like, for instance, if their words of affirmation is like awesome kind of person, we are cognizant of that, and that we are generous with saying, like, you're doing a great job. Again, of course, like, when appropriate, like, we don't sort of just like blanket cheerleading every crazy unstructured strategic decision, but like that we remember that, right? But the other piece of it is, and I don't think this is necessarily the best test in the world for it, but it kind of gives us a helping hint, is Myers-Briggs, or like a personality test to kind of figure out like where are you on that TF spectrum, as well as all the other pieces as well, right? Like, but I think that one's really important to kind of know, like, how are you approaching life? Like, what is your sort of MO, so that we can be cognizant of that, and we can be like, but remember to feel, or remember to think through this, right?
Yeah, it's really helpful to sort of know people's gut reaction to things and gut instinct, and to know that they fall on a spectrum, but it helps us develop those deeper relationships with our clients, because their natural inclination is very often not our natural inclination. So something that comes super naturally to us is a big eye-opener for them, and something that's supernatural for them, we're like, never thought of that, or never thought to approach it in that way.
Right.
Marie and I on love languages, both of us are very, very low on gift giving. So that's not something we all automatically, like, that comes to mind for us, but knowing that that is a way that our clients receive affection and love and support is super helpful, because we're like, okay.
Oh, I can write you a note. Yeah. I can give you something personalized, and like it will actually really mean something to you. Or it's like, I would be like, cool.
Yeah. Like it's received in different ways. So I think it's important to put those processes, this is the thinking side of it, to put those processes into your business so that you can have the empathy some of you will naturally have this empathy. Like James, you probably do this all naturally without needing a system.
Right.
But the system helps you to make sure that it's happening on a regular basis, and make sure that everyone is treated sort of in the way that makes the most sense for them.
Yes.
And it's super differentiated, using my teacher words, and individualized.
And I think there's a reason to systematize it, even if it does come naturally to you, which is that, like, as your business grows and you may be bringing on a team, they can also continue to run the business in a way that reflects that value for you, right? That empathy value. So I think there is a benefit to that. Hey, Angelica. Awesome, Stephanie. Let us know if you're interested in joining us for the book club to read it together. If it feels like a good time, we'll be reading it through May. And yes, you're right, James. It is like magic when all of that comes together. It really is. When, like, you know, the clients feel loved and heard and appreciated where they are, who they are. And also it's more rewarding as the business owner to work with people who are feeling heard, right? Because they're more likely to share things with you. You're more likely to get more information out of it. You're better able to help them and get good results for them.
Yeah, I want to quickly also talk a little bit, this is switching gears a tiny bit, but this idea that we wrote in the email too, about how emotion converts better than logic. And I think this is important to the empathy piece, because research, the thinking brain, here's my thinking brain response. Okay, emotion does convert better than logic. People buy from a place of gut feeling, whether it's, you know, excitement, I want that, whether it's fear, I don't want that, whatever the emotion is, people will buy things from an emotional place, and then they'll justify the purchase later with logic. This is just how the brain works. So it's our job, ours specifically as copywriters, but your job too as a leader, to make sure that you are aware of that and using it in a way that is in integrity, and making sure that the way in which you are putting emotional content out in your business is not doing it from a place of things like fear mongering, or, you know, taking advantage of the fact that people buy from emotion. There's nothing wrong with the fact that people buy from emotion, because literally that is just how we do things. You know, my Jimmy John's was bought out of emotion. I really wanted a turkey tongue today. Like, and I really wanted a chocolate chip cookie to go with it. I do not regret that decision, and it was an emotional decision. But there is a way to balance these emotional purchasing decisions with making sure that the emotional copy is written in a way that is really aligned with your own values, so that it doesn't feel like there's been a disconnect or people have been lied to or cheated or anything like that. Which
is exactly what James is bringing up here. He wants Jimmy John's now.
Sorry.
Look what you did.
Really
and not only in alignment with your values, but also in alignment with what you're actually delivering, right? Because I think we can get really caught up in like the promise and the idea of what we're going to be delivering, but unless we actually are confident that we can make that happen, it should never be a promise. Wanting to belong. Okay, are you a Brene Brown fan? I feel like this is like right up your alley. People want so much sorry, words are really hard today. People want so much from wanting to belong. And then in my case, they often regret it later. And I think a lot of that can be because of a failure of delivery, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think we've all sort of either been in or known someone who's been in an experience where a person is a really good salesperson and they're really good at that part of the process, but they fall short on the delivery piece of the process. And it's important to have both, right? You do need to sell your product or your service because otherwise you don't have a business. And we are definitely, you know, we champion building a successful business. You can't be a thought leader unless you have a platform to stand on. And part of that is creating a profitable business for people. Not everyone, but for a lot of people and probably for most people in this group. Yeah. So it's finding that balancing act of being a good salesperson in a non-skeezy way and delivering on the promises that you are making people so that once they make that emotional decision to buy, the logic that they justify with it actually exists. Like that logic pans out because they're getting what they were promised and they feel those good feelings that led them to buy throughout the process of delivery.
Yes. Yeah, and like here's an example of someone who's been burned, right? Like James is saying, I will never buy from anything from someone selling on stage again because there was an instance of being burned there. I do think that like, I don't know the situation exactly, but like, it may not be that that's like blanket statement what's happening every time that tactic is being used. And I think too, the other piece about this that's kind of awesome is that like you guys are all in like figuring out what's right for you. You're also educating yourselves on like marketing strategies so that you can see them. And if you want to tune them out when they're not relevant, like you could go to an event, have a great time, not be interested in whatever they're selling, but still like have a great time, still respect the person, who's organized it, still be meeting great people, still be learning a lot, still be networking, and have a valuable experience because you're able to be like, they're making their profitable business their way, right? Yeah. Like maybe I'm wrong on that. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I feel like being educated around the processes and the tactics allows us to make more informed decisions and to like tap into that logical part of ourselves when we're hearing the emotion-based sales drive.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I think people who spend a lot of time in this space, we become very cognizant of what the different types of strategies are because we're using them in our own business or we're hiring people who know how to use them. And so we have sort of a at least surface level knowledge of what they are, why they exist, where they are implemented in our business and things like that, which doesn't necessarily exist as much on the C part of the B2C spectrum. So like if I had no marketing or sales experience whatsoever, and I was being exposed to a lot of these, I might be a lot more willing to buy just like anything that crosses my path. And in fact, when it was very early in our entrepreneurship days, there were a lot more shiny objects because we weren't really savvy to, oh, they're using this marketing tactic now, or oh, they're using this, but do I really need that? Because we hadn't figured out a system for that yet either. So and it makes it harder in some ways, right? So if you're in the B2B space, especially the B2B entrepreneurship space, selling can be really friggin' hard sometimes because everyone
are savvy.
Everyone is savvy, and we're not trying to trick anyone. But the savviness also leads to a certain amount of skepticism and cynicism because people have been burned by people who are savvy salespeople but not savvy deliverers. So there's an extra step in our process where we don't just have to convey the emotions, but we also have to acknowledge that savviness and make sure that these people feel taken care of so that they are positive that the delivery is going to pan out, because it's one of those burn me once, I will never come back situations.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it becomes a blanket situation, like never wanting to buy from on stage because I was burnt on stage once. And I mean, those feelings are legitimate.
Right.
So I think that, you know, those of us in the B2B space, we have sort of an extra thought process to go through there.
Yeah, so be cognizant of that too, depending on who your clients are, right? Like to be aware of their awareness level of marketing strategies. I do think that it can never hurt to be even more authentic. It can never hurt to be more in integrity. Like we were just having a conversation like privately the other day, James, about like you had some questions. I was answering them because like things were being miscommunicated, right? Like I take full responsibility for that. Like I was sort of communicating things that really easily could have been received as not being in integrity for us. And so I think it's always really important to like, acknowledge that like people like you know what we're talking about, and like our clients are savvy, right? And so like we always need to bear that in mind, and B, like always being open to just having that discussion and like talk through it and be like, oh, this is where my brain was. Like, I'm sorry, that's not what I meant, you know? So I think that's only a good strategy regardless of how savvy your client base is, but like just being aware of that is super helpful.
Yeah, and so open communication is huge. And I think another thing that's huge is being willing to admit when you sort of miss the boat on some of it. And even when it's not through any fault of your own. I remember a situation about a year ago where someone bought one of our programs thinking it would be a really, really good fit, and realized a couple of days into the program that it wasn't. And it wasn't that the program didn't deliver on the promises, it was that she interpreted the promises differently than the other people in the program. And so we had no problem giving her a refund and like talking through how we could better verbalize certain things. You know, maybe adding something to an FAQ section or something small like that, because it was such a small thing that 99% of the people, everything was perfectly on target, but not every brain works the same way as our trained brain. So I think being willing to also, like, when some misinterpretation happens, step back.
It's like a good one.
No, actually, I wasn't talking about you.
Never mind.
We love you, Angelica. Yes. But I think the conversations that you and Maria have had are sort of along those lines too, though. And I think that being open to having those conversations in the first place already puts you ahead of so many other people in the B2B space who are just, like you said, Angelica, selling drama, selling story, which, yes, story sells, but it better be a true story. And you better be able to deliver.
Yes. So, yeah, this whole conversation, and this is all kind of grounded in that thought process around like emotion being a driver of sales, and then like leveraging logic to allow people to like justify the sale. It sounds tacticky, but I want to go again to my grant writing background. So this is one of the things that we would do when I'd have a conversation with somebody, like somebody who ran a foundation, right? Like a private foundation, and they would, like, one of their things they would give to would, for instance, be education. Well, we were a museum, we had educational programs, sounded like a good fit from the get-go. So have a conversation with them. And they really always, you know, if they'd had infinite dollars at their disposal, like, why wouldn't they want to support the museum I was affiliated with, right? Like, because we were doing great things, and it's a really important thing. I worked at the Holocaust Museum in Houston, and so like it was about educating people about the tragedy, allowing people to identify their place on the spectrum, actually, of upstander to bystander, to perpetrator, right? And then a lot of us sort of stand in the bystander role, whereas like actually that's harmful. There's a lot of great education around this. We had anti-bullying education. Like, it was, who wouldn't want to support this, right? But there's limited resources. So some of the things that I would do is just tell stories, true stories, about like students that had gone through the programs, or like young people who'd gone through the exhibit, and their response and their reaction. And if we had access to like sort of pre and post test around their behaviors and the way that they treated others, and the way that they stood up for not even just their friends, but just other people who were being bullied or were sort of in tough spots. When we were able to share those stories by using like actual real stories, you know, not just sort of saying like, here's an example of a whatever, like, you know, Brendan, blah, 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 or whatever, like we were able to do that. And then also say like, this is one representative story of several that we have, and it's backed up by this data. This is all true stuff, right? Like it's not a tactic. It's saying like, we have, you know, 96% recidivism rates and blah, 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 like whatever it was. And to be able to show that like students stayed in the program, students really did actually embrace these new behaviors and change the way they interacted with other people over the long term, and have the data to support it. It was much easier, I found, to get people to become first-time foundation donors to the museum than it was using the old tactics, which were just purely factual, saying like 96% of students, blah, blah, blah. It's just being able to show a human element to it, and to be able to show the impact on an individual life, just to give people some sort of tangible example of what it is. But also to like allow them to feel a little bit and to be like, wow, this is really important. Like, man, this changes that kid's life. That's amazing. And if this is happening in, you know, 50 school districts, then like, that's amazing. Right.
That's why people love the chicken soup books. Right? Because they're like that. They're a bunch of little stories that have a really profound impact and make everyone cry. And like even me, like that's saying something. And they don't have a CTA to them because they're just like a collection of essays and stories. But if they did have a CTA added to them, that would make really, really compelling copy.
I think the CTA is, look at all the other specialized chicken soup books we have here in the
There are 8 billion now.
Chicken soup for dog lovers. I'm like, cue the waterworks. There we go. It's just over.
Well, and you know, I think one really good skill that I've developed over the past couple of years in recognizing where I fall on the spectrum is knowing when to ask for help from people who are further down the spectrum from me. Because I can't just go from this end of the spectrum and I can't go from one end of like being on the thinking end. I can't go from being a 100 or 99.9% thinker to what would a 99% feeler, how would they react to what I'm doing? And so I've actually developed a practice over time where if I have to write something, whether it's copy for a client or usually it's like an email that I have to send out, I will like call on Marie and be like, okay, I have this email, I wrote it.
Feeling self.
I need a feeling person. I need someone to add some feels to this, so please help me to add this piece to it. And that's one of the reasons why Marie and I work so well together as writers, because like one of us will go in with the thinking hat on and then the other can go through and add the feels, and then we can keep going back and forth until we have the perfect balance.
Yeah, but you can do this yourself, right? So like say you're writing a sales page, for instance, for your amazing new program, and you write it, just stream of consciousness, whatever, go away for like 12 to 24 hours, and then say, okay, I'm coming back to it with the other side of me, right? Which is like my thinking brain or whatever it is. And to say like, now I'm going to look at it from this angle. Or if you have a friend or like a biz bestie or like some, you know, if you're in a mastermind program or something where you're able to get some feedback from people, say like, I would really love for you to read this. Does it feel compelling, or does it sort of flow logically, or whatever it is?
Yeah, I'm putting something in the comments. Hey, Rachel, yay! Yeah, okay, so there's this thing that I used to do with one of the professional development seminars that I ran for teachers, and I love this activity. It's called the 7 Thinking Hats. It's used in corporate and in the education spaces. It's by a guy named Edward DeBono, and basically it invites you to approach anything that you're working on, any project, with these 6 different hats on. And if you're doing a group project, each person can wear a different hat, or you can do it individually. And when you're looking at that thing, you can only look at it through the lens of the hat. So each hat has a different color, so I'll just kind of read through it really quickly. But if you look up Edward de Bono thinking hats, it'll come up for you. So the white hat is information known or needing. So that is the facts hat. So when I write, I naturally write from the white hat immediately. This is sounding very Westworld all of a sudden.
Yes.
The yellow hat symbolizes brightness and optimism. So when I go back and revise something with the yellow hat on, I'm only looking for the positives, the values, and the benefits. The next hat is the black hat, which is the judgment. It's the devil's advocate. So when you need to address objections or why something might not work.
FAQ.
Yes, I'm looking at everything with the black hat perspective. The red hat is feelings, hunches, and intuition. So you can express the emotions, shared likes, fears, loves, hates. It's also where you can kind of try to project how people might interpret what you're writing and then address that. So that's where you're like, the person who's like super far on the feeling end can kind of go in there and add in their comments and thoughts. The green hat focuses on creativity, the possibilities, alternatives, and new ideas and new concepts. So a lot of times this is what Marie and I call, this isn't ours, but what we call the like dream section of copy, where we basically are like, what could be based off of this? Let's put the creativity hat on. And then the final hat is the blue hat, which is the manager. It manages the thinking process. So that is the part of your brain that is like, okay, have I used each of these hats? Have I used them effectively?
It's like the continuity piece. Like, so there's actually a woman in my fiction writing group who just started, sorry, I just stepped on your foot. She actually has a background in reality TV screenplays, but her job was actually like the continuity person. And she was like making sure that there weren't like plot, like logic loops or holes, or that there weren't sort of missed opportunities. So that's sort of what that is coming out for me.
Yeah, so, and the thing that I like about this is my thinking brain, but the thing that I like about this is it gives everything a place. So whatever you're naturally strong on, you're gonna wear those hats regardless. But whatever you're naturally weak on, it's a reminder to kind of go and address those.
Totally, totally. I like that strategy. I actually haven't heard of that.
So oh, really? Cool. I never told you about that?
No!
It's a fun one.
I learned something new today.
It's a fun one.
Yeah, but that is great. Yeah, because I was sort of thinking about it just in terms of like the white hat and the red hat, but there are many hats. So I like this.
Yeah, well, it's that continuum thing, and it's not even really a continuum. It's almost like there's this central focal point that is the person, and then there are all these little spokes out of it that talk about different aspects of feelings, different aspects of thinking, and you know, there's like short-term focused thinking and logicking versus are you someone who focuses on the long term and the long game? Right. A lot of people are much easier at seeing a 3 to 5 year vision, or much better at that, whereas some people are much better at seeing the very short bursts of what's the logical step forward.
Totally, totally. So hopefully that helps too at that sort of final point of like, how do you sort of manage these two ends of the logic to feel spectrum, and everything in between. And it's not just sort of a flat plane, but I think this really demonstrated that there's a lot more going on. But when you're able to do that, you're able to add really a human element to your content, to your sales strategies, and to your leadership, right? Where you're kind of looking at how am I communicating with people? How am I addressing their needs in a way that's respectful to them and that sort of speaks to all of them.
Yeah, so to quickly recap, all leaders feel feelings, and all leaders have a portion of their brain dedicated to logicking. And in order to be an effective leader, you have to leverage both of them and find balance between both of them, because when both come together, like James said, magic happens.
Yes.
So we would love to hear, thank you for those of you who are joining us for participating, like offering your feedback, but if you haven't yet, or if you're watching on the replay, we would love to know where you feel like you fall on the spectrum and how you sort of counterbalance for what is not necessarily your natural strength. Because already this week in having the conversations, I've gotten some great ideas from people in the group. Leanna had some great suggestions yesterday. And like we said, we are not the experts in this. We are just coming to you with our experiences, and our experiences are a little lopsided because we're thinkers. Yeah. So please feel free to participate with your own thoughts, insights, experiences, and all of that. And then the other thing that is worth, I think, mentioning is the fact that finding this balance point really is tied back to how well you know yourself, but also how well you know your audience, how well you know your team members, and things like that, which is another reason why we're really excited to be reading Ask next month for the book club, because market research and audience research always feels so, it can, if approached the wrong way, feel very dry and logical. But I think
clinical, right?
Yeah, it's very clinical. And I think that going through this book together as a group will allow the feelers and the thinkers in the group to reach a sort of equilibrium where there's here's the technical logical of what works, and here's how the empathy piece can play a role, and push them together and create that magical mixture.
Exactly. Yeah. So there are definitely systems, strategies, processes within this book to implement. So that's going to make everybody happy, I think, because a lot of people are like, yay, I have a system. The feeling people will be like, there's a system out there for this. Like you said, James, you know, like if you're bringing on a VA, to be able to allow them to sort of tap into that because it's a value for you. But also, the whole first half of this book is, or maybe not half, but like first section of the book really is sort of a personal story and a personal journey to this. And it does invite the feelings, and it does invite the whole self to be participatory in this process. So
I think that's important.
It's a nicely balanced book, and I think it's going to help everyone sort of find some equilibrium on this and tap into their strengths, and then also tap into opportunities. So if you're interested in joining the book club, this is officially the official launch. We had sort of a beta launch that's in the midst of going on this month, where we're reading The Art of Possibility. But if you want to join us in May for Ask, the deadline to make sure that you're going to get your book in time is May 20th.
That's Friday.
So, yeah, that's this Friday. That's like 2 days from now. So you can visit the link here that I posted from my account. It was Jessie posting, northstarmessaging.com/book club. You can read more about the book. You can read more about the club and what you get in it. But essentially, it is, you get the book. Of course, you get a suggested reading guide, suggested reading passages, a summary of the book, just in case you're short on time. We're choosing books, at least at this point, that should be able to be completed in 15 minutes of reading a day. We're also going to have daily journal prompts. That was actually a great recommendation from James. Thank you so much. We're going to be implementing that. And also there's going to be a group calls and discussions, and there's a private Facebook group as well. So we would love to have you join us for this book, to learn more about audience research and also to implement it in your business in a way that feels really good for your thinking/feeling self.
Absolutely, we'd love to have you. The link is in the comments. And then the one last piece of housekeeping is that next week we will not be having a live stream. We will be having a roundtable discussion, which means we'll be meeting in Zoom.
Yes.
Were you going to sing?
No, I was just something dancing. I'm like, I like that. They're fun.
Something's happening over here.
It's a feeling.
Yes. So, yeah, so we're going to be having the roundtable next week. The topic will be announced on Monday. The Zoom links will be sent out Wednesday morning before we go live, about half hour before, as well as posted here in the Facebook group. So you have all of the details to join us in our conversation. We are going to continue doing these roundtables about once a month. So this will be our third official one. We intend to keep them going as long as you guys keep finding value in them. So we hope to see you there. Keep an eye on your email for the topic. We hope to see you in the book club, and thank you for watching this week.
Bye.